to our lunch keynotes. And I know in the chat, everyone's talking about how jazzy the hold music is. I hope you like the music for the NextGen intro too, because it really gets me pumped up for the sessions. I hope you all were able to take a few minutes to run to the restroom, grab a snack, check out the environment. The exhibit hall is always a great place to download tons of resources. So if you haven't been over there yet, definitely head over, check out those resources, because as a reminder, that's how you're going to raise up on the leaderboard to get that Amazon gift card, which I know you definitely want because I want it. So I know you all do as well. All right, we've got our first poll of this session. And for this one, I really want to get a vibe check from folks. How are we feeling? Are we getting a little tired? Do we need some more coffee or some caffeine? Are you feeling good? Let me know. Answer this poll here. And of course, in the chat, you can, of course, let us know what you thought of the first breakout sessions, the good, the bad, the ugly. We want all the feedback possible because we're always looking for ways to improve NextGen for next year. And while you're answering that poll or chatting in the chat, I do want to take a second to talk to you about our 2023 NextGen Public Service Awards. So these are the annual NextGen Public Service Awards that we put on that honor you, the wonderful government employees that are out there doing all of the amazing work that you do. And we honor our 12 NextGen Public Service Award winners in 5 different categories. We've got Innovator of the Year, Supervisor of the Year, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Champion, Advancing Tech Pioneer, Communicator of the Year, and Outstanding Colleague. And I know you know someone who would fit into one or all of these categories. And if you do, look in the Resource Center right now, and you can nominate one of your colleagues for our award program. And you definitely want to, because you all do such incredible work, and oftentimes it goes maybe a little under the radar, perhaps. So it's a great way to just call someone out and say, hey, I think you're doing a good job. All right. I am going to give you a few more seconds to answer that poll. And while you do, I want to talk a little bit about our first keynote of this lunchtime hour. And it's called Nothing Stays the Same: How to Embrace, Not Fight Change. I don't know about you, but sometimes when a change is coming up, I go into it kicking and screaming, and I'm like, no, I don't want this. And if you're anything like me and feeling that way, you could probably utilize this session. All right, let's see the results of the poll. And it looks like 70% of you are ready to go. Another 20% of you need some more coffee. And I get it, friends. I need some more coffee too. So fear not. We're going to hopefully energize you with this next session. And let me introduce you to our speaker. Joining us is John Verico. John is the Chief of Media and Community Relations for the Science and Technology Directorate at the Department of Homeland Security. And he also wins the title of having the most festive tie we've seen so far in NextGen. So thrilled to have you joining us, John. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. It's always wonderful to be part of this event. And so I'm so glad that you invited me back. It must be because of my ties, but I'm really looking forward to this. So interesting topic today. Nothing stays the same. Change, we know, is always kind of a little bit crazy. So I'm going to ask you, let's put up the first poll if we can. And so if I were to ask you, if you wanted everything in your life to remain exactly the same as it is right now, in other words, you didn't have to deal with any change, what would you say? Yes or no? Let's give you just a moment or two to pick that. And wow, 100% of you said absolutely not. You do not want things to stay the same. Well, then, so what's the big deal about change? So let's put the second poll up, and let's just kind of get a flavor for the kinds of things that we wish would change in our lives. Can we put the second poll up? Now, there's
yes.
there are several.
Sorry. John, I don't mean to interrupt you really quickly, but I know that first poll moved really, really quickly. So a lot of you probably missed it. Don't worry. We will still get you the CPE credit, but we're going to leave this poll up here, John, for about a minute or so. So our friends have a little bit longer of a time to take it.
Good. Yeah, I was surprised when the answers came up that quickly anyway. So we want to go back. Now, there's multiple choices here. Pick all of those things that you would like to change in your life and scroll down because there's a couple of more underneath the screen. So please do take an opportunity to look at those things that you might want something to change in your life. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your waistline. Maybe you would like a different job, or you want some improvements done in your house, or you want your college loan finally paid off, or you want your kids to finally clean up their room, or maybe you want a new car, maybe you want more money, or maybe you want less money, and if you do, let me know. Or maybe you'd just rather be any place else than another virtual meeting like today. So please make your selections, and let's see where we go from here, just to get a flavor for the kinds of things people want to change in their life.
All right, so we're going to give people about 10 more seconds to take the poll. About half of you have already taken it, and then we'll get the results. We should do a little like drum roll. And when asked, what would you change? Health was the #1 result here, John.
Yeah, a lot of people checked off the waistline. Kind of middle of the road on job, home, debt, kids' behavior. A lot of people, looks like the #1 of people wanted more money, and somebody actually clicked less money. So I would like you to connect with me later on, and I will try to find ways to help you have less money. It's really funny. That question very rarely gets any response, and I don't know why. But and then I'm glad to see that not too many of you would rather be someplace else than listening to this fat guy with a bright tie chatting about change. So thank you very much for that. So it gives you a good idea. You can see there's a lot of variation, but also there's a lot of commonalities too. A lot of people want something to change in their life. So let's go to the third question now. And this one is probably the most important, I think, here. This is where we really get some enlightenment. Excuse me. Allergies have been kicking me. So what would you say, do you want to be changed? In other words, you couldn't choose what changed in your life. So you were not in control of the change. So do you want to be changed, yes or no? Let's see how this one goes.
I think this is such an interesting question too, John, because it puts the onus on us to make the decision. Oftentimes we feel like change is thrust upon us. There's a new executive order out. There's a new directive from your boss. But in this case, in the question you're asking, we're looking at ourselves and what we need to do internally here.
Yes, exactly. So let's see what this looks like.
Few more seconds.
Okay.
As someone just said, I love the mystery. And I do too. I love the mystery as well. All right. Here we go.
Wow. So this is surprising. There's more than half of you said you don't mind being subject to change that was outside of your control. And this is very enlightening, because one of the things that we want to keep in mind is the fact that we work in government and nothing changes more than in government. So let's move on from here. And this is, like I said, this is very telling. And Emily, I'd love to save this result for later on analysis too. So a lot of people wanted change to happen in their life. There were a variety of things that they wanted to change. And then when it came to the fact of what if they're being changed, but not in control of what that change is, more than half of you said, yeah, fine with me. That's cool. That's great. Well, so let's talk about what this whole concept of change really means. Change, excuse me, sorry. Change happens to all of us, right? There's some change that we want, some change that we don't want. Life is continuous change. We know that, especially, I'm going to go back to the government reference. Working in government, no one is more subject to more frequent change. We have changes in budget, we change in mission, changes in priority. You get a new boss, the needs of our constituents changes. Crisis, responding to crises happens all the time, and there's a big difference between office crises and true life, somebody's bleeding out kind of crises. Pandemics, there's rules, regulations, congressional oversight, aka interference, sometimes with how we function on a day-to-day basis. And those changes take place at all levels, right? So people rotate in and out every couple of years. We get new team members all the time, and they have to start the learning and adjusting process all over again. And then we have changes all the time in leadership, right? Every couple of years, we get a new boss. And what happens when a new boss comes in? Excuse me. Sometimes we luck out and we say, yeah, thank goodness that changed. Good. Yay, we got a good boss. And then sometimes maybe not so much. I've been in government, and you probably have seen this in my bio. I'm not going to go into my bio, but I've been doing public affairs for government agencies for over 42 years. And yes, that makes me feel horrendously ancient to say that. But in that time, I would say the most common expression that I have heard from people in government is, "Are you serious?" When faced with a new change, the reaction typically is, "Are you serious? I've been here 20 years. You can't do things like that. You can't just willy-nilly go change things around. Some chucklehead comes in here, thinks we can just start doing things differently." And one of my favorites was, when you get a new boss and they say, "I've been appointed to fix this organization," as if we're a bunch of stray cats that need to be fixed. It's a frustrating thing. And let's face it, when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, change is absolutely frightening. People tend to resist when the change comes and they're unsure about what's coming forward, right? So we want change, but at the same time, we're kind of terrified of it, right? We're looking at that new job, new processes, we're in changes in our relationships. What happens with change is it means that we're leaving a comfort zone, even if that comfort zone, that thing that we're familiar with, might be horrible. The fact that there's a change happening, there's always a fear that something is going to be worse coming in on the other side. So we've known this, for many years. I mean, there are 5 health crises or 5 impacts to health that have been the same common problems in society. The behavioral issues are smoking, overeating, stress, too much drinking, and not enough exercise. They're the same problems we've had for 50 years, more than that. But people still continue to do these things because change is hard. Change is really, really hard. And so how do you go through this, right? So overcoming such a strong fear of change gets to be kind of a challenge, right? And that's because the parts of our brain that deal with change, we're hardwired to fear change. The parts of our brain that are involved in fear are also the parts of our brain that are involved in comfort. So that's our amygdala. And our amygdala, when there's a change in our comfort zone, we are automatically programmed to fear it. And this comes from our reptilian roots. It's a survival mechanism. Back in our reptilian roots, deep in the amygdala, is this. If you think about reptiles and how they change as they grow, they molt, which means they shed their outer skin. This is not a very comfortable thing. Those of you who've gotten sunburn like I did recently and started to peel know how itchy and uncomfortable that can be. So these animals go through this as they continue to grow. But the first thing that happens is a little bit of film starts to form over their eye as a protective coating while they're going through this change. That means that during change, they're effectively blind. They can't see what's going on around them. So because of that, they're at their most vulnerable point, and being vulnerable causes them to fear. And so during a time of change, they're worried about what's going on around them. They're worried about the impact that's going to happen on themselves. They start to act in irrational ways and lash out. Anybody who's ever had a pet snake or an iguana or whatever knows that when they're going through a molt, they are cranky. And this is what happens to us as human beings dealing with change as well. So it's really it comes down to the fact that psychologically, we have these anchoring beliefs within us. And so I'm going to talk about those just a little bit, and understanding those beliefs, maybe we can help to overcome them when we're faced with an unwanted change. The first is that if I change, I'll be encountering new situations that I'm not prepared for, which will make me feel anxious, uncomfortable, and inadequate. This is fully not true, but it is a very, very common anchoring belief, and one of the most principal ones that psychologists have found that people go through when they're facing change. They're worried about whether or not they're going to be able to be up to task. The second is that if I change, then I'm allowing myself to be exploited. I'm just doing what the man wants me to do, instead of being able to do the things I prefer to do. The third anchoring belief is that, the unknown is obviously uncertain, and where I am now, what I'm dealing with now, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm dealing with, and so I'd rather not change. The fourth and final one of these is that change requires effort, and if it's effort, then it's obviously going to be painful, something I do not want to do. These are the anchoring beliefs that we're dealing with psychologically deep inside of ourselves, and I know a lot of you said that these things are not actually that you are willing to do some change. But when we talk about change, and I don't know how to get me, Emily, can we get me as the main image for the moment? That's kind of scary.
You are the main image for our attendees, so don't you worry.
Oh, okay. So the slides aren't the big thing. The slides are kind of off to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, so everybody can see me. So I'm gonna put this forward, and we talk about change. We talk about our expectations in life, right? So I'm not going to do an official poll, but I'll say how many of you, think about this. How many of you like to color, right? You still like to get coloring books and do coloring, and that's become very, very popular again. It's a great stress relief, right? So we go to the store and we buy a coloring book. We have expectations of what that coloring book is going to look like. So we know that when we open that coloring book, there are going to be these drawings, these outlines that we can color in, right? And so that is the expectation that we have when we're getting our coloring book. But what happens if the unexpected happens? A change that we did not expect. So presto changeo, right? Now we look at that. Everything we knew, everything we expected in life is now suddenly gone. The pages are blank. What the heck do we do? This is what we fear will happen during a time of change. What we rarely think about is the fact that sometimes change can be truly, truly magical. And we can actually make change. So change becomes a thing of beauty. There's my cheesy dad magic for you for today. So the whole concept here is to change our mindset about change. So let's look at the truths about change instead of the anchoring beliefs and all the suspicions. So first thing to think about is that change is the one thing you can count on. Change is constantly going to happen. Okay, good, fine, live with it, accept it, move forward. The second is that it's not personal. Chances are there's a whole lot of other people going through exactly the kind of change that you are. Speaking of a government agency, yeah, we're all of us are dealing with the new boss or the new policies or whatever is going on. There's an ancient proverb that says if you live long enough, everything will happen to you. Now that kind of sounds like a sucky reason to stick around, but if you think about it, right, at some point in your life, you're going to be doing well. You're going to be healthy. You're going to be sick. You're going to be, you're going to have money. You're going to need cash. You're going to have a lovely home. You're going to be, bunking on your friend's couch. At different points in your life, different things are going to happen. In some story, you're going to be the hero. In another story, you may be the victim. And in a whole other story, you may be the villain for someone else. So the longer you live, if you live long enough, the more chances all of these things are going to happen to you. And we don't know where other people are in this cycle. So That's why I always try to stress to people to be more compassionate and understanding, because we're all going through change of some sort. So with that in mind, keeping in mind that it is not personal. Your beliefs about change are not always your friend, and those are the beliefs we just talked about. So I won't go into depth on those again. Change is not the enemy. It is our fear of change, how we react to change, how we let change impact us. That is the problem. And so, I'm so sorry. I'm really glad I have a voice today, actually, because a few hours ago I didn't. So I was like, oh, please, Emily's going to kill me if I can't talk. Okay. So another thing to keep in mind is that you are more resilient than you think you are. So you should believe in yourself and your ability to get through change. Your future is built on a bedrock, which is you, which is unchanging. So no matter what changes around you, you are in control. So I will say that using the quote from Maya Angelou, you cannot control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. So remember, it's our choice. And then the final thing to remember about the truths about change is that there is a predictable emotional cycle to change. And here's that cycle. We start off with denial. I can't believe they're going to do this. Then you get angry. Ugh, why are they doing this? And then you're like, okay, what if we change this and not that? Maybe we can bargain about this a little. And finally you get to a point where like you're completely bummed out. I'm just going to have to deal with this. And then you ultimately get to a point where you accept the change. Does this cycle look familiar to you? It's exactly the same as the cycle of the stages of grief, because change represents the death of our comfort zone in our eyes. So there's another part of the cycle I want to show you. So change happens, right? We go through this whole ordeal of the grief cycle, and we get to the point where we accept change. Once we accept change, we realize that we have options on how to move forward. Once we know what those options are, we can take action. And once we take action, we now become more adaptable and stronger to the next time change happens. So it is a continuous cycle. And we live in the middle of all of this. And LIVE is an acronym for our loves and our passions, our inner talents, our values, and the environment around us. Okay. So keep in mind that change provides for us opportunity. And so many times, especially in government, we get so much of this stuff. We sit there and go, opportunity is nowhere. I just can't deal with this. But we need to reframe and think of it this way. That change provides us an opportunity that is now here and open to us. I will open it up to Emily. Do we have time for a question or two?
We do. And I've got a lot of questions in here, but if you've been holding back, well, feel free to throw a question into the Q&A portal. But John, my first one is, there seems to be a lot of talk in the Q&A portal and in the chat about understanding your own role in change, right? Like you were talking about some of the stuff that happens, let's say agency-wide. Your boss sends out a memo that maybe you have to return to work. Not that you weren't working when you were at home, but you know what I mean. You have to return to the office, right?
Like how I'm in the office today. And I was supposed to be doing this remotely.
Versus change that maybe I want to start eating healthier, so I am making that change myself. How do you figure out, and you were talking about the acceptance group, the chart, graph, whatever you want to call it. How do you accept or differentiate between the two?
Okay, so the main thing of all of this, no matter what, whether the change is something that's happening to you or change that you want to implement yourself, it's still a matter of the same steps. And that is just applying yourself to figure out what needs to change, how you need to conform to the new norm, whatever that is, and what are the steps that you need to do. So whether you now have to give up your lovely telework life and start going back into the office and dealing with the commute, Or if you want to start, walking or running or eating healthier or whatever it is, all of those things require exactly the same thing. You figure out a plan for the steps you need to take to achieve those goals. Now, there's a great book out there. It was called Leading Change by John Cotter. It came out a number of years ago. And there's a great process in there for understanding the steps involved in the change. And the first, of course, is to, and I'm going to, if I can, I'm going to skip real forward to a backup slide I have here that says, there has to be a sense of urgency, right? Understanding what it is that needs to change. And then you form a coalition. You get some people together and you work to be a team. Like, so be that person who says, hey, how's that diet coming when they see you grabbing a cupcake? So you get some people together that help to move forward. You create a vision. You work together towards that vision. You empower others to make decisions and to go forward. You have some short-term wins. Take things a little bite at a time. That whole thing about eat the elephant one bite at a time. And then you consolidate improvements a little at a time. And then ultimately you reach that point where you hit the change. So that was the fast version of Leading Change, but I do recommend that book if anybody wants to check it out.
Awesome. All right, one final quick question for you. Is there a limit to our capacity for change, right? Like the pandemic happened, there was so much going on, and that was only one slice of all of our lives, right? You have family, you have jobs, you have working out, all of these places. Do we have a capacity for how much we can change at any given moment?
So that is very subjective. Everyone's capacity to deal with stuff before becoming overwhelmed is going to be very individual. So only you know how much you can deal with. I always do recommend that if you get to a point where you're so overwhelmed and you can't deal with it anymore and you just want to sit down and cry, then sometimes it's good to turn to that coalition that you have, right? Turn to your posse, get your friends together, whoever it is, talk about what you're dealing with. Never keep things internalized. Always look to share and to communicate as much as possible. And sometimes, if needed, go get professional help. We were going through a move. I'll tell this story very, very briefly. We had to quickly sell my house in order to keep the VA loan and get the VA loan on our new house when we were trying to move. And so we were packing and packing and packing, but the whole thing happened so fast, there was no time to cull 35 years of accumulated stuff in the house. And so we were spending every moment packing and such like that. And my wife got to one of the cabinets, and she opened the cabinet in a room that she thought was completely empty, and the cabinet was still full. And that was her breaking point. And she sat and cried for a little while. And then we got back up and we hugged and we got back to it, emptied the cabinet, and off we went. So everyone's capacity is going to be a little bit different.
Awesome. All right. You have one thing to end us on here, John?
I do. I want you to remember one final thing out of this whole thing. And I don't care what it is. So hopefully you took one nugget out of this presentation or out of your entire time at this conference and you learned something. I encourage you to learn something new every day and take something home and make it part of yourself. So that's what I got. My contact info is there. It's on the slides. I assume you're going to be sending that out if anyone needs to reach out to me. I'll be happy to chat. And also the questions that we did not get to, Emily, if you want to send them to me afterward, I will try to answer them and then you can send them back out to the people who asked.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, John, for kicking off our lunch hour. We really appreciate it. Virtual snaps for you, of course. And we will be talking to you soon. All right. But the great content, we're just getting things started here because right now we're going to talk about owning your own journey. And by journey, we mean your career journey because, well, here's a secret. No one is really going to be planning your career for you. And joining us to talk about this is Jennifer Palatka. Jennifer is the Director of Human Resource Management and the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Commerce. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jessica.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So Jessica's session for our attendees here is going to be a Q&A. So if you have been stuck in your career and you're trying to figure out where to go next, well, she's here to answer your questions. But I am going to get things started because let's lay the groundwork, Jessica. Why do so many of us expect a supervisor or a colleague or your mom's friend's neighbor to help you advance in your career? Why is that expectation so prevalent?
I think that, first of all, I think John's discussion is just the perfect segue into this, because the way that he talked about the supervisory relationship and leaders looking at us almost like a group of stray cats at times, right? I think it's so apropos. And then also the question that he asked about, do you want to affect your own change, or do you want that change to happen to yourself, right? So those questions that he asked and what everyone shared back that they would like to change, it's so appropriate to how we start to frame this discussion. And a lot of the times, when you think about your own career, people look to, like you said, coworkers, peers, mentors, and we expect them to be able to tell us the magic key to success. And the reason is you can go research how to perform your job. You can go research how to get a degree or certification. You can go research how to buy a house. All of those things can be done via research. Knowing what steps you should take in your career is not something necessarily that's going to have a very strict, laid out, censored plan for you. That's something you're going to have to really do a lot of soul searching on. So we look to people to help guide us and help tell us and help give us the experiences they had to then help us navigate that on our own. It's not just one easy go out and research, right? There's a lot of different anecdotal information, and there's a lot of internal soul searching that really has to go into that yourself.
All right, we are getting a ton of questions here.
Love it.
Jessica. So one more for you here. Sure. What are a couple strategies? So someone wrote in the chat, and I think this is a good question. They said, how do you not take the reins of your own career? And I think for a lot of us, it might not be as apparent. So what are 1 to 3 strategies that can help you maybe take more ownership of your career trajectory?
So a solid career plan is really key to owning that trajectory. Many organizations are becoming much more mature in their own succession planning. And with that comes defined career paths. With that comes defined training and skills that are required of you. And a lot of the times it's really easy to get comfortable on that path and to see that path. And that might be a very good path for you. It might specifically lay out for you how to gain success in the organization that you're in. And all of a sudden you're on this path and you're doing the training and you're meeting the checkpoints and you're moving it. And at some point you turn around and go, did I even want this? The organization wants it. You're meeting the mission and vision of the position and the structure. And it might be back to that 50-50 question John laid out. Some people want the opportunity to get on that path and know they're on that path. And then there's another 50% that say, well, that's one path, but I might also like path 2 or 3. So it's really interesting when you say, how can you not have control of it? Well, sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes a corporation or a government entity is telling you, hey, here's your career path. This is what we've laid out for you. Sometimes it's through a training and a leadership development program. You're on this track for so many years. Sometimes it's a defined career path. But it's real easy to get comfortable there and see the success. And again, 50-50. That might work for some and it doesn't work for others. So it really just depends on where it is that you want to end up and what you want to end up doing.
All right. Next question says, what do you recommend for someone who wouldn't mind a career change but feels stuck due to, and they use this term called golden handcuffs, meaning that if they were trying to get to do something new in their career, they'd have to take a pay cut that could potentially impact their quality of life. I think a lot of us get stuck in, I have to take this next step up because I have to pay for daycare or whatever else it is. How would you think about that issue?
So what's interesting to me is the way that question ended. It ended with a massive pay cut that would impact a huge quality of life, right? So then what is the point of making the change? If your quality of life is then so focused around that financial impact, then maybe that's your indicator that it's not time to change. What I would recommend is perhaps sitting down with a broader picture and looking at what is impacting your quality of life and why you want to make that change. So to say you want to make a career change, is it because your current career is impacting your quality of life in a negative way in some way, right? So what are you willing to compromise? What are you willing to negotiate? And at what level is your quality of life going to be at the level that you want it to be at? So what's so interesting to me is that final point in that question, that reflects around quality of life. Because if you're starting by saying, hey, I wouldn't mind a career change, if you wouldn't mind, then why? What is it that's making you think that? Is it, boredom? Is it maturity? Is it, hey, I've done everything I can do here? Then maybe that financial impact and that quality of life is more important than the mental stress that's going to come with a complete career change and loss of financial income, right? So I would absolutely recommend before you do anything, you start with what your actual plan is, and not just the next move, but 3, 4, 5 moves down the line, and really think through what it is that you want to achieve, and not just in your career, but in your overall, in your life. And it goes back again to John's points of what is it that you're looking for? What would you love to change? More money, less money? Those were both options. And some people said less money. And that might be something people are willing to negotiate if it does mean a better position for them. So it really just comes down to those quality of life factors.
Gotcha. All right. I got a real tactical one in here.
Okay.
It says, how do I get feedback from hiring managers? Because oftentimes you are applying into a portal, whether on the federal government side, you have USA Jobs, on the state and local side, there are similar platforms. It feels like you're applying into a void, and then you may or may not hear back. So how do you get that feedback that you need to get that next job?
So is the assumption then that you did not get the job that you applied for? Is that what the question is asking?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So there's different steps in this process. And keep in mind, for government and private, again, like you said, a little dissimilar, but there's definitely still parts that are along the same lines. So I see a position online that I'm interested in. I submit a resume. Now, in my opinion, that's your first point of failure in some cases. A lot of the times people will go, well, here's my resume, submit. No. Look at the job description. Does your resume actually match the job that you're applying for? You should cater your resume to every job it takes a little bit more time. Absolutely. But knowing you can do the job, and the HR representative, not the hiring manager, the HR representative who's looking at that resume, they have to know that you can do it. So take the time to add some of the keywords from the job announcement into your resume as you apply. Take the time to cater your resume a little bit more to actually fit that job. And that's the first glance. That's just you on a piece of paper, okay? And then from there, if you get past that point, we might get to the point where a hiring manager is now looking at your resume. What is a hiring manager for that position going to be looking for beyond just HR? HR is looking for keywords, especially in private sector, right? They're looking for keywords. Do they have the experience? Do they have the education that's necessary? Now, the HR manager or the hiring manager is going to start looking a little bit more formally. They're going to decide who it is that they want to interview. They're going to start reaching out to candidates. If you get to the point of an interview, hopefully you have some sort of contact information. Highly recommend you keep that. So much I get contacted by people who have interviewed with my department who don't remember who they spoke with, but they found me on LinkedIn and want to know if I can help them get somebody's email address. I'm going, what am I, a Rolodex over here? How did you not keep a phone number? So just keeping track of your notes, keeping track of the names of the individuals, doing some research online. A lot of the times you'll get a meeting maker, see who else is invited, things like that you can start to track some of that. Now, specific to USA Jobs, every time you apply to the job, scroll all the way to the bottom. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's going to be a block with contact information. It's always there. And it says, if you have questions, if you need to know, there's an email address. Sometimes there's a phone number. Not always. Sometimes there's a phone number. But keep track of that information. Go back into your USA Jobs account. It stores all the jobs that you applied for. And you can go to the bottom and see that address. And you can always reach back out. When you are in your interview, if you're in the interview itself and you want to have that information, should you not be afforded the job, let them know that at the end of the interview. There is nothing wrong with saying, I would appreciate interview feedback regardless of the outcome. Let them know that you're interested in personal development as well. If someone calls me and asks me, I would absolutely share that with them. So you have to put it out there in order to get it back. Don't always advocate for yourself. Don't feel like you can't. You can always advocate for yourself to get that information back.
Okay, so in the chat, someone is talking about details or rotations. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot when it comes to exploring new career opportunities is to potentially take a detail with another agency or another department within your organization so that you can get some new experience without necessarily having to apply for a full new job. But the chat was centered around the idea of sometimes it can be really difficult to get your supervisor's approval for that because you're working on their team and they don't want to see your valuable talent go away. How do you advocate for maybe some of these opportunities that may exist, knowing that there's a full workload that's happening over here?
Right. So great question. And what it shows me is that you're considering the impact on the team. You're not thinking individualistically. You're thinking like a team player, and you want to take that into consideration. That's very admirable. Every year, about the June timeframe. So my fiscal year ends at the end of September. Every year in June, all of a sudden, I start getting an influx of training requests. We have money left. Suddenly, I want to do this training, and I go, no, I'm sorry. Show me. Where on some sort of plan, whether it's a formalized IDP, if it's your career plan you've agreed to with your supervisor, that at the beginning of the year, you created a performance objective for yourself that said that training was relevant and necessary. Okay, that's something you wanted to do. It's something you discussed when you set your objectives. It's something when you discussed during your mid-years. Show me where that's actually contributing and has been planned. Not we have money left, I'm gonna go take a training. Okay, how does it actually impact your work? How is it going to provide a return on investment? And I use that term intentionally because you can't just think about it from the benefit to yourself, right? And by the askers questioning, they already aren't. They're thinking about the team. They're thinking about how it impacts everyone, and that's very smart. So continue the thought process of return on investment as well. So one, you want it documented ahead of time. I'm interested in the detail. Let them know at the beginning of the year. This is something either this year, next year, long-term, whatever it might be. These are some of the areas that I'm looking to work in. This is how long I'd like the detail to be. And lay it out, set out a plan for yourself and get your supervisor to buy into it before you ever approach them and say, hey, I got a detail, I'm out. Because that's where you're gonna get the pushback of, we have this project due. I have these timelines, what am I supposed to do? Start as early as you can. Just like you would plan anything else in your career, that is something else that you need to consider, that you need to plan as part of your journey. Lay it out early, get their buy-in, have a plan for it, be thoughtful about it. How is it going to bring a return on investment back to when you do come back? What is the impact for your supervisor in you taking that detail? A lot of the times there's shared knowledge, there's shared information, there's all kinds of stuff that could come back when you return and bring back with you. So use that to your advantage. Plan early, get buy-in, be thoughtful about it, and put it in terms that they're going to want to hear and respect.
Awesome. All right, we're going to do some lightning round questions because we only have a few minutes left here. And someone asked, how do you apply for job opportunities that are not within your area of expertise? Because in order to get the next job, you have to step out of your comfort zone, perhaps, but I don't have any experience in that area necessarily. So how do I get in the door without having the background?
Ooh, great question. Okay, so I would recommend, career planning as early as you can. If this is something of interest to you, and sometimes you just realize it when you see the job, and that's fine. If you, at any point in time, you can start to think, you know what, I think I want to veer off. I think I want to have several different paths that I can follow. Start to think about what it is that you're going to need. Is it training? Is it certification? The second, get creative. Okay. So when you look at this new opportunity, what is it about that opportunity that you think you can do that you would apply? You're not going to just apply for a job because you really like it and you have nothing you can offer it. Obviously, you're thinking there's something that you're going to bring that makes you relevant to that job. So make sure, again, when you look at your resume, that it's going to spark the interest of whoever's looking at it. You're starting with HR first, who's looking for keywords, and then a hiring manager who's really looking for that specialized expertise. So if you don't have that, what do you have that you can offer? And make sure you cater and curtail your resume to reflect that. It doesn't have to be one generic resume for every job. I don't recommend that. I recommend looking ahead, even if you're a passive candidate, going out and looking at job boards now, seeing what's out there for your next job 3 to 5 years down the line. Start getting the training on your own. Start looking at those things as early as you can. Don't leave it until you're at the point where you are an active candidate and you have got to find a job. Then it's too late.
All right. Next in our rapid fire is, what are your suggestions to ending one role while maintaining positive relationships with a former boss or colleague?
Whew, isn't that always challenging? So you've heard me say this how many times now. Planning is crucial. There is nothing wrong with telling your supervisor at the beginning of a year, I'm starting to outgrow this position. I will start looking in 6 to 9 months, and it's not an ultimatum. It's being honest and allows for planning and succession planning. There's nothing wrong with being honest about that. As a manager, if I've had this happen just even recently, where I had an employee come to me during the start of a performance year and saying, hey, I'm going to start looking. Wonderful. I want you to go out. I want you to go to other agencies. I want you to go to other departments. I want you to go learn and maybe bring it back. Maybe call me afterwards and tell me what we were doing wrong, if you find some best practices. But being open, being honest, being transparent, and not using the opportunity to burn that bridge as soon as you cross it. It feels so easy to do sometimes, to just throw that match and walk away. It's not just, if your intent is to maintain those relationships, open and transparent, providing turnover, as much documentation as you can, everything you can to set them up for success after you leave. Now, are you required to do that? No, definitely not. But do you want to maintain those relationships and ensure there is a smooth transition, and you really are interested in their success? Then you probably should, in good faith. Yes.
All right, final question for you. The theme of this keynote is own your own career. So if you could talk to our entire audience here and tell us your piece of advice for them to take that ownership piece, what would it be?
So I can give you an example to own your own career from my own experience, and that is, do not stovepipe yourself. So I was with an organization, and there was this one job, and that job was the job I wanted. That was my long-term job. And I knew the job I had to get to the next one I had to get to the next one to get to that job. And sure enough, I proceeded up this pipeline, and I got to the point to interview for that job. And I was like, I'm here. I did it. How many years it took me? How many years? I'm interviewing for this job. I'm so excited. I didn't get that job. Well, so now what? Was I a failure because I didn't get that one job? Meanwhile, I had gotten 5 promotions to get up to that point, right? Was I a failure because, I wasn't able to? No. Have multiple options. All of a sudden here I am now at this level going, well, now what do I do? Don't stovepipe yourself. There's not one end all be all for your career. There might be several opportunities. There might be several options. Keep them open. Use mentors as much as you can. Talk to as many people as you can. Get your own mentors and mentees and talk to them. Get your word out as much as you can about everything that it is that you're thinking and want to do. And the networking that you'll build will help you ensure that one job won't always be just the one job that you're looking at. There's going to be plenty of other jobs that you're interested in. And I think I'm doing just fine now that I didn't get that one job. But had I given up then, who knows? Don't stovepipe yourself. Keep yourself broad. Keep your options open.
I love that. All right. Thank you so much, Jessica, for your rapid fire career advice to all of us. There are definitely going to be all of us updating our resumes later today. So thank you so much for that. And this hour is not over, because joining us now to talk about inclusion in action is the wonderful Treva Smith, who's the Deputy Director at the National Geospatial-Intelligence College. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will hand the reins over to you.
Hello. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, team. I am really honored to have just a couple of minutes with you to talk about inclusion in action. And I have to tell you, I don't know if it's by accident or just some great fortuitous planning here, but the conversations are really anchored in a way that they're going to build upon each other, starting with John as he talked about change and how we navigate change, moving into that space of how you then manage your career and how you can take the tenets of the change to manage your career. Now I want to talk about how we really walk through inclusion in action. Now, here's the thing. As we have this conversation, I want to set your minds to think about yourselves individually right now. I don't want you to think about your manager, or your supervisor, or your agency director, or your colleague, or your coworker, and whether they're inclusive or not. I want you to really sit and let's think about ourselves individually. Here's the thing. When we really start saying the word inclusion, oftentimes it's tied to diversity. And while our agencies have done really good jobs kind of moving through the space of diversity and inclusion, oftentimes we seek the successes by thinking about demographics and data and targeted recruitment. And we've unintentionally leaned ourselves towards counting people, and we've missed some great opportunities to ensure that we are making people count. Now, one of the things, and individually as we're thinking, we often say is, well, it's the EEO office. They have the responsibility for inclusion. It's my director. He has the responsibility for inclusion. It's my supervisor. They have the responsibility for inclusion. But I'm here to say today, we all, I, you, us, we have the responsibility for inclusion. Now, before I talk a little bit about some tips that you can use today to start expanding that space of inclusion, I want to talk about how we show up. I want to talk about the 3 dimensions of ourselves in any given day, right? Oftentimes people see the first dimension. Dimension number 1 is how I appear. Obviously, I'm an African-American woman, right? That's that first dimension. The second dimension is my life's experiences. Where am I from? I was born in the 70s. I'm an Army brat. I've lived in Germany. I went to college in Washington, D.C. I've worked at 9 different agencies. I progressed from a GS4 to a senior executive. I'm a member of a sorority, right? And so that's that second dimension that really begins to take place in and presence through inclusion. The third dimension is who I am just in my mental space, right? And so I'm going to use Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is the easiest. I'm an INTJ, which means I can be a little bit introverted. I have a lot of time to think. I'm intuitive, and I judge processes and procedure. The beauty of Myers-Briggs is not for me to know I'm an INTJ and lock in and say, hey, that's just who I am, everyone deal with it. It's really about me saying, that's who I am, I have self-awareness, and now I can navigate how I engage with others. And so I just want us to walk through and think about how we show up in those 3 dimensions every day, and then how inclusion kind of ties into that. Now, here's the thing, and you can drop it down in the chat. Where do you think people really kind of stop in their understanding of dimension? Is it dimension 1 where they see you and say, oh, that's an African-American, female? I was born in the 70s, but I'm forever 30. So is it sometimes people really trying to get to know you? I'll tell you the answer. Unfortunately, we stop at dimension number 1, just on what people look like. But now is the time for us to break outside of that and get into inclusion. And to do that, I think one of the best ways is to rest ourselves in commonalities. What do we have in common? Let's see. Are we all interested in our continued growth, our continued career growth? I think we all have that in common. You're here today because you're interested in your career growth. So we have something in common. Are we all sitting here hoping our internet doesn't go out? I am. I think you probably are too. We all have that in common. Are we at some point this evening going to have dinner? I think so. We all have that in common. I could go on and on and on about the commonalities that we can really wrap our arms around as we really start thinking about inclusion in the workplace. It seems simple, but I gotta tell you that sometimes the simplest things that really aren't that easy. Same with the change. You say you want it, but then you're kind of saying, I don't know if I can really do all this stuff. Same with career strategy. You know, we're talking about laying out plans and very systematic thinking. You're thinking, oh, well, you know, we'll just see how it all works out, right? That's the same thing that happens with inclusion in the workplace sometimes. You know, by the time you think through diversity and inclusion, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to do the wrong thing? Am I going to, you know, be off-putting? Just forget it. I'll go to my desk and work, right? So it's the same things. And it puts you in a space where you're anxious and a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. You can take it step by step. And I'm going to give you a few tips, and then we're going to jump into a few questions. The first tip, give grace to all who's around you. We just talked about the 3 dimensions, right? So give grace and really just stop and breathe and not be upset if someone maybe doesn't speak or if they don't say good morning. Give a little grace to that because everyone is challenged and dealing with so many things, internal and external to work. The second thing, find cues of commonalities and conversation starters. And I have to tell you, if you walk by anyone's desk or anyone's cubicle, they have artifacts right there that you can maximize to use for communication. In my office, I have a lot of Army things. So people will walk in and say, oh, tell me about that certificate or tell me about that statue. And we then start a conversation and it's based on some cues that are already around you. Number 3, get involved. Have you read your agency strategy? Have you read and understand your core values? Do you know who's through your leadership train? Get involved in some of your agency activities. These are ways that you're able to get to know people in your organization, and it reduces that feeling of being uncomfortable and that feeling of anxiousness being with and around others in your organization. The fourth thing that I am going to offer, and then we'll jump into questions, is you have to remain consistent. It is so hard sometimes stepping into this unknown space of change as you're moving through inclusion and inclusive conversations that you'll start and you'll say, well, I didn't get the response that I wanted, so I'll just give up, right? But you have to do it every single day. You have to really take it upon yourself. We know that it's everyone's responsibility. We know that everyone isn't perfect. We know that we're going to extend grace, but we know that we're going to continue to be truly consistent in inclusive conversations. It truly starts with you, and you can make an impact today. Emily, any questions?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing your insights to us, and they're always so valuable. And yes, we've got plenty of questions coming in. And the first one, and I think this is a really honest question. It says, the responsibility seems to rely more on people of color to seek out and facilitate the commonalities. And it can be exhausting. And I think there is that feeling, you know, we were talking about burnout in the opening keynotes this morning, but there's really this idea that it's hard to do some of this stuff, and it can be tiring, and the onus perhaps feels on people who already perhaps feel marginalized. What is your kind of response to that?
So my response to that is to say, number one, you are correct. You are right. The number of panels I get called for because we have to have a duly constituted panel. And I love the panels in my organization. Actually, I love my organization, you know, but it feels like I have to do double work sometimes, right? Being the one to start the conversations. Here's what I would actually offer, especially if you are in a supervisory role or you're in a team lead role. There's a very neat, seamless way to kind of start and generate conversation where you don't find yourself as the minority. And I'm in the minority category, diverse, having to generate and be the lead on these types of things, right? If you're a team lead, go around the team at the end of every single meeting and ask the question, what did I miss? What's on top of mind? Right? It gives people a chance to lean into the conversation. It gives the team lead a chance to say, hey, you had a really good point. Let's chat about that later. You had a really good point. I'd love for you to share more, to start building the communication and the space for communication such that others will begin to naturally own it. I do 100% understand exactly what you're saying when it can be extremely exhausting. But I also want you to consider, not that it's wrong or right, but consider how sometimes, again, we get into the space and we're saying, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to engage. And so sometimes that tipping point, just giving people space, is a way to get to that good engagement and build relationship. That was a great question. Thank you.
Definitely. All right. 2 more quick questions for you. And the first is, you know, there's a lot of dimensions of diversity right now, whether we're talking about race, sex, any accessibility, disability, all of these different things. How can we ensure that part of this conversation is to make those colleagues feel and actually be safe in the workplace? How do we create that psychological safety so that inclusion can actually happen?
That psychological safety comes from consistency. And for all, it comes from reading the room, right? And so I'll give an example. Every morning I walk down a hall and I say good morning to every single individual. I thought that that was great. I thought that, you know, hey, listen, doesn't everybody want a good morning? Everybody doesn't. And my team member was, you know, clear to say, hey, listen, I'm just getting kind of started for my day. And you're walking saying, good morning, good morning, good morning. And that's that part of the self-awareness that says, I am a leader in my organization and I'm going to create a space where my team members can show up. And if I have a team member who is saying, hey, listen, that's a bit much every single morning, I'm going to make that adjustment. That's where the psychological safety starts. The psychological safety also starts with that one tip I shared, asking team members, what did I miss? What's on top of mind that you would like to discuss that we have an opportunity to work on as a team and resolve? Creating space for team members to show up and be present is truly key in the space to building an inclusive, psychologically safe workforce.
I love that example of just saying good morning, because I can tell you anecdotally in our house, my husband is not a morning person. And as expected, I wake up as a chipper little bird and I'm like, hello, how are you doing today? And he's like, if you don't leave me alone, this isn't going to end well. Like we got to have some time. And I think that's exactly right. Not everybody is going to want to interact with you in the exact same way. So creating the space that works for them is so critically important. All right.
And that's the importance of understanding dimensions as well. I've taken time just by cues and listening to conversations and asking questions and talking about things that the weather, you know, a play that's going to be in DC, Cherry Blossom Festival. There's so many things that we can talk about to generate and understand one another. Oftentimes when we say the word inclusion, the first thing we want to talk about is race, age, you know, national origin, you know, all of these things, but there are like 1,000 other conversations to make connections, right? And so I think sometimes it's about making connections based on commonalities. All right.
All right, final question for you. What role can non-supervisor employees play in making work more inclusive? So I can't set a department-wide policy. I can't set a policy for my team, but I want to create a more inclusive workplace. What do I do? That
is literally the perfect question. So there are a couple of things that I would offer. I have a team member who sends instant message jabbers every day. and they just list what the national days are, right? It's National Cupcake Day. It's National, Ride Your Bike to Work Day. It's National Comic Book Day. It's Cartoon Day. What's your favorite cereal? You would be amazed at the length of conversation and jabber responses we get in just learning about, oh my goodness, my favorite cupcake is, oh my goodness, I used to ride my bike to work every day until I moved, out into the boonies. Oh my goodness. Those are ways that you kind of build seamlessly. Number two, I would offer maybe check with your supervisor to see if you could do a, where's our organization, right? Where everyone, where's Waldo, the little thing you just take a little picture with. Yeah, right. And so we did a summer series of that where we said, okay, everywhere we went, we took little Waldo with us and we took a picture at a national museum or artifact, and we came back and said, this is what we did. And we had conversations around our summer vacations. And even though people had staycations, they, became a tourist in their own city so they could bring back some great pictures and we could share in the workforce. But those are like key ways to kind of start that. But that National Day is one of the best conversation starters ever.
I love that.
And
all right.
National Days is National Public Service Servants Week. And so can we just all give ourselves a round of applause for us being public servants? I have 34 years. And so, yes, a round of applause for everybody.
Definitely. It is Public Service Recognition Week, to your point. So yes, definitely give yourselves props for the wonderful work you all are doing, because it is not easy. But I want to thank you, Treva, for your wonderful insights with us as always. And I think we can all think about inclusion in its many dimensions, all of them important. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right. We have a whole half day left of content for you. Coming up very shortly, we've got 5 breakout sessions that you'll be able to choose from. So you can head back out into the conference hall and select one of those, of course. Don't forget, though, that you do need to do the survey if you want to get your CPE credit. Each session has its own survey, so make sure you are being diligent in those, because we want to make sure we're getting you all the credit that you deserve. Like I mentioned, head back into the hall, for the conference hall, to select your next session. And in the meantime, you can, of course, check out the exhibit hall as well as the networking lounge. I want to hop over there and meet you all, of course. I will see you all soon in our next breakout session. Bye.